Dr. Dina Katabi is the Andrew and Erna Vetterby Professor of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science at MIT. She completed her bachelor's degree at the University of Damascus in Syria before earning a master's and doctoral degree in computer science from MIT. She's a renowned scholar in wireless signals and in topics that I can't pronounce. In 2013, she received a MacArthur Fellowship, also known as a Genius Grant. Today, she joins us on Chet Talks. Dina, welcome to Chet Talks.
Thanks, Ray. I'm very happy to be here.
So, Dina, you're a professor at MIT. I assume you're teaching some courses, probably doing them online. How's the teaching going, and what cool things is MIT doing to address the COVID pandemic?
How's teaching going? It's crazy. So I'm teaching an undergraduate class, and it is about teaching students how to do research. So imagine taking that online. It's like every student has to access a lab. Some of them are building circuits, some of them are building robots, and so we have to deal with all of these issues just overnight. Things are fine so far, and we got like few weeks of exciting work and a lot of stress, but now the students are fine, and the faculty are fine as well, and things are going well.
So among those robots and circuits is a device called Emerald. It uses low power radio waves to monitor people in their home. Can you describe this device to us?
Sure. So actually, I do have one in my home. Maybe I can show see whether I can do that. So do you see it, like that white box next to the lamp? It disappears into the environment. It's very much similar to a Wi-Fi box that you put in your home, and it uses the wireless signals in the environment to analyze physiological signals. So it can get my sleep, my breathing, it can get my movement, my gait speed. If I have apneas during night, it will detect that. And all of it without any device or wearables, it's just completely passively.
Now you can imagine that there are lots of different applications for this. You know, I'm sure the FBI and CIA would love to have devices that can monitor people without them knowing about it. Why did you choose healthcare for its application?
I think, maybe like the time that we are in, and particularly with like a viral contagious disease, you can see the importance of doing something like this. Basically, on one hand, healthcare is big issue and big challenge for everyone, and this epidemic has kind of revealed all of the issues in the system and the inefficiencies. So imagine if you could actually send those coronavirus patients to their home for home isolation, but at the same time be able to continuously monitor their breathing, their behavior, their fatigue. If things escalate, you can bring them back to the hospital. So there are so many things in the healthcare system, not to mention like also pushing clinical trials to the home and doing virtual trials. So all of that is much more exciting than the CIA stuff.
You mentioned that these potential applications, you're actually going to tell us about a real individual who's evidently been infected with COVID, and you have assessments on that individual before and after the infection?
So I'm going to show you some data at the end about that COVID patient. Unfortunately, we don't have before the infection, but what happened is that this is one of the assisted living communities that has done some studies with us, and they were very interested to come back to us and say, okay, we have this scenario and we are having problems, like nobody wants to get into the room, but we want, of course, to be able to continuously attend to the patient. So can we use that device to get the patient physiological signals without having to have physical contact?
You mentioned a lot of things that the device can measure. What are its limitations?
So as I mentioned, it uses a wireless signal in the environment to analyze the physiological signals of people. So means we all have experience with Wi-Fi. There is a certain range beyond which, like if you go further away, you don't receive your Wi-Fi from the router inside your home. So there is limitation of range, and it works within the coverage area of the wireless signal. This is, I think, one limitation. The other limitation is that it's not like a camera, so that's good. It doesn't get information that we consider too private about how we look or how we are dressed, but also it doesn't have the resolution of camera, so that if two people are very close to each other, it might confuse them sometimes to like whether there are one big person versus two people. So, but as they get away from each other, it discovers that those conditions and recorrect itself.
With the device, you can tell where people are in their homes and even ascertain what people are doing. So how do you address these privacy concerns?
Yeah, so of course, the first thing, we never really monitor anything without people consent and under IRB. And the second thing is all the data is de-identified, so we separate any identifiers from the data, and everything is encrypted both at rest and in transit. The data access to the data is monitored with people need the credential, which is basically the proper passwords to be able to access the data, and that access is decided by the owner of the data. So we think of the patient as the owner of the data, and the patient can, based on consent, say, okay, my doctor can access the data, or the site who's doing the clinical trial can access the data.
You've conducted several studies with the device for multiple purposes. Can you describe some of the results? I know you have some slides that you might want to share.
Sure. Yeah, so actually, let me start with, I can show some the basic things that we do and then get to the more recent stuff with coronavirus. Yeah, so as we said, the device at a high level is something that looks like a Wi-Fi box, and it analyzes the signal using machine learning algorithm to spit out various physiological signals. This includes gait speed, sleep, breathing, interaction with caregiver, and many others. I can show you a few results, and I can start from a study that we did together in Parkinson's patients and with the Michael J. Fox Foundation. I'm just going to show like a bit of high-level results, and then we can get into few other results that are, so we start with gait, and then we get to sleep, and then we get to respiration, and so on. But for people who don't know about the device, just for you guys to understand how it works, so I said it's very much like a Wi-Fi box. So here, this is not with a patient, this is just to show you like how the device works. So the device is not even in this office, it's behind the wall. And we're going to use the fact that wireless signal can monitor people through walls. So we are going to monitor this person as he moves. And this red dot here is where the device thinks this person is standing right now. So if I play this video for you, so let me play it. Yeah, so as he moves, you can see the red dot is tracking him. And you see, like, he doesn't have any wearables. In fact, he doesn't have a cell phone. He doesn't have any devices on himself. Like, it's all based on how the wireless signals interact with his body as he's moving. And you can see the tracking is very accurate. In fact, if there are any glitches, it's actually due to the Zoom and the wireless connectivity. It's not the device. So once you have the ability to track people and their movement this accurately, then you can use that in the device in the home, just so that you can monitor people as they are moving and their activity at their gait. So this is from one of our deployment, and you see this is a device very similar to the device that I showed you at the beginning in my home. And just using this device, we deployed it here. There is a Parkinson patient, and this is the Emerald device. And what you see here is a trajectory. This is 2-hour trajectory. This patient lives in an assisted living community. And this is his movements for 2 hours. You can see goes between the bed, the chair, this kitchen area, the bathroom. And we take all of this data, and we look at the life of this Parkinson patient and the other Parkinson patient in our study. So I think this graph actually is very interesting, and to understand what you can do once you have the ability to passively see the life of someone and their movements. So each circle here is 1 day, And it goes from midnight, 0 at the top, to 12, which is midday, and then just goes on. And the innermost circle is the first day, and the outermost circle is the last day. This is about 2 months. And you can see here, for example, this blue area is when he's in bed asleep, and the green area is when he's sitting on a chair, and there is yellow, which refers to the bathroom. But if you see, for example, the blue at the beginning of the study here near the center, you see that his sleep was highly basically fragmented at the beginning of the study. But then as we move on with the study, the blue got consolidated, so the sleep is much better. The other thing that you see in his behavior is this green all over the place, which refers to when he sits on his chair. So here, this chair is this green area. And you can see this person just wakes up, sits on a chair, and that is all that he does with his life. Another thing that is really interesting, actually, is that if you look at the bathroom, so yellow here, the yellow region, you see a cone of yellow around 8 a.m. And when I looked at this at the beginning, I was like, okay, what's going on here? I mean, this is somebody who wakes up, as we can see, the blue stops around 3, 4 a.m. in the morning. He sits on a chair until 8 a.m. to go to do his toileting and showering. Like, why would he do that? And it turned out that actually what's happening here is that he's waiting for the worker, the helper who comes in the assisted living and comes at 8 a.m. in the morning. So that tells you that this person is unable to do his daily activity, like just the basic thing, toileting and showering on his own. And that's very important if you are trying to understand the quality of life of those patients. So these are some of the behavior related stuff. But then we started looking at the gait speed, and of course with both Parkinson's, you want to relate the gait speed to the UPDRS of the patients. So here what you see on the x-axis is the UPDRS part 3, which is the motor section, and on the y-axis is the gait speed from our measurement in the home. And as you can see, there is high correlation between the UPDRS of the patients and the gait speed. So you can see that the correlation is 78%, and the p-value is very small, which indicates that we can actually have a good trust in this result if that the gait speed in the home is highly correlated with the Parkinson motor score. When I first presented this, it was just like, okay, we were wondering, it was at the Michael J. Fox Foundation, it was a meeting there, and then it's like, okay, so how about the whole UPDRS actually? So yeah, it is natural that gait speed was in the home, we would expect it to correlate with the motor score of UPDRS, but does it correlate actually with the total score of UPDRS? So we went and measured that, and actually it turned out that the correlation is slightly higher. It's actually 81% with the total UPDRS. So in fact, it is showing high correlation between how the person walk on their gait in their home and their UPDRS. And this is, of course, for Parkinson's patients.
And just for some of our listeners aren't familiar with Parkinson's disease, so this is showing that on the Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale that greater motor impairment, higher scores are associated with slower gait speed in somebody's natural environment in the home.
Yes, exactly, right. So the other thing that is really interesting for me is sleep. I have bad sleep, and it made it even more disastrous to monitor. And as you can see, that's the device in my home. So now I can see how bad actually is my sleep. So like when we go to sleep, our brain, of course, enters different stages, and these stages are awake, light sleep, deep sleep, and REM, or rapid eye movements. And these sleep stages are very important for sleep disorders like what I have, but they are also very important for a variety of diseases. Like sleep is a platform for a variety of diseases. Including, for example, anxiety and depression and mood disorder. We know in Parkinson, for example, sleep gets very disrupted. And today, if you want to monitor sleep, I mean, this is what you do. You send your patient to sleep lab, and they put all of these sensors on his body and his head and asked him to sleep like this. This is very difficult to do. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys have been to a sleep lab, but it's really not the way a person sleeps at home. So we were able to measure sleep stages with our device. This is our device, transmits very low power wireless signal, and spits out the sleep stages after it analyzes the signal using machine learning. So so this is illustration, but actually I can tell you a bit more about the actual study that we did. And we did many studies. Some of them are done and some of them are ongoing. And so we looked at sleep with both with Parkinson patients, with healthy individuals, with there's a study that that is ongoing with epilepsy, with atopic dermatitis, etc. And so this is just an illustration for you if you are not familiar with how sleep is measured or sleep staging. So on the x-axis, you see time, and on the y-axis, you see the different sleep stages: awake, REM, light, deep sleep. And blue is our device, and the green is PSG. And PSG is the gold standard. So it's that thing that you put all of these sensors on the patient's body. And as you can see, they are very similar. So this guy goes to sleep around 2 a.m., falls asleep, he's in light sleep. And then there is like this incursion into deep sleep, but then he wakes up. He stays awake for about an hour and then falls asleep again, light sleep, and then deep sleep, and then light sleep, and a bit of REM, and so on. So as you can see, there is very high similarity between what we measure and the actual measurement from the sleep staging from the gold standard. And many people, when they talk about sleep, they are also interested in sleep apnea. So the breathing, apnea, of course, refers to stopping, the patient stops to breathe, stop breathing at night. So here you can see breathing, and the patient then stops breathing and then breathes again, stop breathing, and so on. And maybe I can show some of the sleep stuff from some of our Parkinson patients here. So these are Parkinson patients that we were monitoring. And again, this is very similar to the graph that I showed you. Every circle is 1 day. And you can look here, for example, at this person. He goes to sleep. This is just sleep now. He goes to sleep around 11 p.m. and he wakes up around maybe like 4 a.m. in the morning. You look at this one, he goes to sleep around, again, 11 p.m., but he wakes up around 6 a.m. So this guy is fairly normal. This guy is reasonable, not sleeping as much, but still reasonable. But look at this guy, for example. The sleep is all over the place, very irregular. There is no pattern, waking up anytime, going to sleep anytime. All of these guys are Parkinson patients, but there is very big differences in their sleep. I'm going to show you a bit more about sleep as we talk also about COVID patients. And Ray can comment on sleep in Parkinson's. We are like now interested in looking at even like exploring sleep further in early Parkinson and things that lead to Parkinson's. I can interview you.
No, that's great. So you can imagine there are sleep disorders in Parkinson's, including REM sleep behavior disorder.
Yes.
People act out their dreams, and sometimes they even physically get out of bed, or they have large movements during REM sleep, which is normally associated with paralysis. So when we're dreaming about getting chased by a tiger, we don't actually act out those dreams, but people with REM sleep behavior disorder actually act out their dreams, sometimes strike and hit their bed partner, sometimes scream. And it turns out that REM sleep behavior disorder is actually a bad marker for other neurodegenerative conditions that can develop in the future, such as Parkinson's disease and other diseases.
Yeah, so imagine if you have a device that you can put in person's home, and it will track that every single night, and without having to ask them to put all of these electrodes on their head, or to go even worse, to go to and sleep in a clinical or a sleep lab to do this. Talking now, maybe like can show a bit of our results from COVID, more recent stuff. So I'm going to show a bit of the effect of stay at home on some of the people in a variety of the trial that we have been involved with. And then I'm going to zoom in on the COVID patient, the COVID positive patient, and show you a bit of her results as well. So maybe we can start here. So I showed you that the device can track how people are moving in their homes. And now with the lockdown, the stay-at-home policy, many people have changed their behavior because, I mean, they can't go out. So that is expected, but actually not being able to go out like indirectly changes other types of behavior that we have. So, so we took these trajectories, and I'm going to show you like where the patient is, but I'm going to show you in a different format. So in this format, so instead of the circle, now we are going to have on the x-axis is the day, and on the y-axis is the time in the day, okay? So, so every column in this figure is going to be 1 day, as opposed to every circle. Now every column is 1 day. So let's look at this. So, so as I told you, every column here, like let's say take this column, this is 1 day, and this is before the lockdown, and this is after, or the stay-at-home policy. And you can see this patient, this is the week before the stay-at-home policy in Massachusetts, and this is after. So you can see this patient, actually, I probably should tell you that pink refers to the patient being in bed, and green here refers to the patient being in the kitchen, and this light brown refers to the bathroom. And black is when the patient outside the coverage area of the wireless signal. So he has a big home, we can't cover the whole home, and so he can get outside the coverage area. But look at this, like before the coronavirus lockdown, you can see that this patient just goes home, sleep, I mean, mostly is in bed, and then actually, like when he wakes up, he goes to the bathroom, showers, and then he leaves for work. And then he comes in the evening here, and there's just like a bit of entering the kitchen, and eventually goes to sleep. And mostly he's waking up at the same time every single day. And on the weekend, this particular person actually travels on the weekend. So he lives in a place where, and his significant other lives in a different place. So every weekend, actually, he travels. But then there was a stay-at-home policy, and you see the behavior has changed significantly. First, he's not traveling on weekends anymore, but look at this, the time in bed, which is the pink area. So at the beginning, he started the first day the same as before, like going to sleep at the same time, waking up, going to the bathroom. But then very quickly that behavior has changed, and he started sleeping longer and more random time, like sleeping a bit earlier and staying in bed longer. But the interesting thing here is also, like in the afternoon, you see all of these naps, like all of these small pinkish time in bed. These are naps. So basically what we know from observation, of course not everyone, but people tend to have more unstructured sleep, and many of them start napping in the afternoon.
So Dina, I know we're gonna get questions from people and they're gonna put it in the question and answers, but is the pink saying that they're in bed, or is it saying that they're in bed asleep?
So that's a good question. So this is saying just that they are in bed. So I'm going to show you some of the actual sleep on the next slide. But to show the sleep, so there are major changes to sleep, but to show the sleep, I have to, like, again, change the representation a bit. So we talked about deep sleep and light sleep and REM, but I want now to have a representation that allows me to show multiple days next to each other. So this is going to be deep sleep, this white section, and then light sleep is slightly narrower section, and REM is this even narrower section, and if there is nothing, then the person is awake, and the blue region is the time of sleep, like the time he was in bed.
And for the sleep aficionados, is deep sleep stage 3 and 4 and light 1 and 2, or?
Yeah, exactly. So deep is stage 3 and 4, and light is 1 and 2, and then REM is REM, and awake is awake. Yeah, so now let's look at some representative people. So, so here's one person, and as you can see before and after. So you can see that this person before the stay-at-home policy, again, like he has this very structured sleep, and he wakes up exactly around the same time. This person wakes up, seems around 6 a.m. in the morning, and on the weekend he sleeps longer. But then the lockdown started, and again, you see very similar behavior to the other guy that I showed you. Actually, this is a different person, but now you see it in terms of the actual sleep and the sleep stages. So you can see that the sleep becomes less structured. In fact, it's interesting that it's kind of like this semi-circle kind of thing, or half a circle or a quarter of a circle. Like he goes to sleep at like increasingly earlier times, and then on weekend later times, and the sleep is much longer than he used to sleep. You see way more sleep cycles here than here. And you see some of this behavior that we talked about, which is napping in the afternoon, that did not exist here. But here's one who's actually even more disrupted. So you can see like his sleep before, it used to be like semi-normal. I mean, he has more awake period than the other guy, but he kind of like have reasonable sleep. But then after, you can see like the sleep is so disrupted, like these like patches of times, short period of sleep and waking up and then going back again to sleep and waking up. Now, I mean, it's hard. I mean, there are many reasons why a person can have their sleep disrupted, but one of the issues, and increasingly this is happening with people as the stay at home continues to affect them, people are getting more worried, they are getting more anxious, they are getting more irritated, and you would expect that to affect sleep in a way or other. And I mean, this is observational data. Of course, we can't really tell the exact reason, but it shows symptoms that are similar to increased anxiety. Recently, we started monitoring a COVID patient. So this is what's very interesting actually to us, and it's exciting at the same time. We're really worried because we got this request from, as I mentioned, from we work with one of the assisted living here in Massachusetts area, and we have done a lot of work with them around Alzheimer's and dementia before. But then they came and said, oh, so we have a COVID positive patient, and we are really interested in whether we can use the device to attend to the patient, because the nurses and the workers are really worried to get into the room, but they also want to be helpful and be able to attend to the patient. Another thing that you may not know, or some of you may know, is that in retirement home and assisted living community, the workers at the facility, typically they don't have clinical skills. I mean, basically in Massachusetts, actually, they are not even allowed to take vitals. They are not trained to do that. And also they don't have the gears, like we talk all the time about hospitals and the risk that people and the clinical staff in hospitals get exposed to. Now imagine a retirement home or assisted living community. Once one of the patients start having or testing positive for COVID, it's a community where the workers there, they don't have the same skills and the same training or the same gears to protect themselves, and they still have to attend to the patient. And also it's much denser than your typical home. There's like, there are many seniors, many vulnerable people around. So it's very important to be able to protect the workers there and also to protect the other residents. So this is very recent results. I'm going to show just a bit of the results that we have. So I just want to show you the interaction between the nurse and the patient here. So let me see whether I can play this video. Okay, so this is the patient moving, it's a bit sped up. So this is a nurse. So as you can see, she comes and they interact like the nurse tries not to enter the room unless it is completely necessary. So she stays next to the door, and you see like when the patient came back, the nurse kind of like jumped away. And they keep interacting. It seems that in this case, she was trying to help the patient with something. Now the nurse has left and the patient went back. And most of the time, this patient is either sitting on her chair or she's sleeping in the bed.
So the nurse in red, the resident's in red and the nurse is in green.
Yes, the resident in red. Thank you. I hope that was clear. Yeah, the resident in red, this is her unit inside the assisted living. And this is the green person who came earlier, like this one, is the health worker who's helping her. And there is a screen, there is a door here, and there is a screen. And the nurse sometimes enter if it's needed, like but if it's not, then they try to keep the interaction this way. So here is also some of the physiological signal of this patient. So the top one is her breathing rate. So we know that COVID affects the lungs, and in this case, you can see the breathing rate is pretty high, actually. It's 20 breaths per minute. And you can see this period here where the breathing actually shoots up all the way to about 26 breaths per minute. Also, actually, what I found really interesting in this graph, so this is her sleep. So this is her breathing during sleep. And one of the things that is really interesting on this night, so you can see huge REM in the first cycle of sleep. So this is about 90 minutes of REM. And it's very early on in sleep, typically for people who are not, who don't know as much about sleep staging. So every cycle of sleep has light sleep, deep sleep, and REM, and then you might have some awake period or you don't, and you go on into another cycle. And what typically happens for the normal people like me and you is that the first cycle has actually a very short period of REM. On average, is 10 minutes only. And it is not normal to have like very large REM at the beginning. There are many potential reasons, but one of them could be also like in depression. Sometimes you see early REM and a lot of REM at the beginning, anxiety. So you can see here that there is a large REM at the beginning, which is unusual typically. So now of course, I'm not a doctor. I don't know, and we have to like collect more data to be able to even like characterize from a data perspective COVID patients and what they are experiencing. But one of the things that connects is like if you think about REM as a time when you have dreams, and if you think about all like what you hear about COVID patients having these vivid dreams, and like they talk about these vivid dreams and hallucination. So maybe this is related to each other, maybe they are not related. So we need more data, but definitely the initial data is interesting and make us think more and interact with our colleagues and have to analyze it at much deeper level. So that gets me to a variety of results that we went through, both related to COVID and non-COVID. So I'll go back to Ray and ask him what he thinks.
So that's outstanding. We have a number of questions. We have nearly 100 participants online, and I know they're going to have lots of questions, and I see some of them coming in. So what's next?
I see. Okay, interesting. That actually, this was exactly my next one. So what's next? So there are two things. Of course, I mean, now with these new results with COVID, we are very much both interested and asked by our colleagues to help and provide assistance in monitoring patients. So that is definitely something that I'm going to devote a lot of my time and resources to. But what next before COVID? We had multiple ongoing trials, some of them that started, some of them that we're about to start, but we are hoping that despite all of the delays in clinical research, we can start them soon. So if you look at this graph on the top, the first row is actually a variety of rare diseases. So you can imagine the ability to monitor patients at home is particularly important in rare diseases because you don't have that many patients, and it's very important to collect all the information that you can about the patients. We just finished a study in FSHD. We are starting one with Rett. We started one with Pompe disease. On the bottoms or the second row of the slide, you see other types of diseases that are not rare diseases, but they cover a variety of the spectrum. So epilepsy, like neurological diseases, of course, is like an area where Emerald can help a lot because there are not that many endpoints. And by being able to monitor and understand and potentially bring in new endpoints, but also autoimmune diseases like Crohn's and IBD related diseases are very interesting. Also, there is like flaring period and then remission, and being able to continuously monitor, one could start asking like, can we predict flares? What are the issues that cause flaring in patients? And also we are looking at atopic dermatitis, and we have the ability to, I haven't showed it today, but we can actually detect scratching just using wireless signals, which very interesting to people who are working on clinical trials in atopic dermatitis. So I hope that is, it's very exciting to me. I hope it's exciting to the audience as well.
Well, we have lots of questions. I think we're going to bring Abby in to ask some questions. And I didn't even know about FSHD. We have some world's leaders in that condition, including Dr. Ravi Tawil at the University of Rochester.
Oh, cool.
Help on that front. I'm going to let Abby come in with some questions.
We have quite a few questions for you, Dina. The first is the Emerald device commercially available? Could one use it to self-monitor health data like you can do with other products like a Fitbit?
Mm-hmm. So it is available, but it's not available directly to consumers. So we work, I am founder or co-founder in a startup that actually commercializing the device, and we work on clinical trials with pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies. Eventually, we hope that we can provide the device for the consumers directly, but at this stage, we want to basically understand all the capabilities of the device and work within confined environment and clinical trials, and particularly the idea of running the trial in the home is very interesting and very applicable to the device. So it is available, but available within the context of clinical trials, not directly to the consumer for the time being.
Great. Now we have a few questions about the range of the device. One is, if you have multiple devices in the home, can you combine them to decrease the amount of out of range time, or is it one per home?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and indeed you can combine them. It's very much similar concept to your Wi-Fi, in the sense that if you have, let's say, 2-story home, then you put one device to cover the top story, another device to cover the lower floor. If your home is large, then you can also put multiple devices, and they work together well.
And what is the Emerald system?
Sorry, say it again.
What is the range of the Emerald system, like approximate square feet?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and it is more complex than your Wi-Fi, because of course some of the signal are very minute. Like if you compare the walking that I showed you when the person moves versus just the chest motion of his breathing. So these are like different scale of motion. For walking and movements, general body movements, it goes up to like 30-40 feet, depending on like the walls and the structure of the home and the furniture. For breathing and sleep and these minute motion, it goes up to like 10 to 15 feet. Again, it depends on the structure of the home. So for example, when we monitor sleep, we want always to put a device in the bedroom of the person, and if we and it can monitor the bedroom, and as the person gets out, like as the bathroom is nearby, it can see it. It can see like potentially the next room. So as I mentioned, it's up to like 30 to 40 feet. But if you have more finer signals like breathing, for example, then the range is shorter.
Have you investigated adding body temperature capabilities?
Yes, I did. So one of the issues is that my team, like the answer that I got from my team is, why should we do this? I mean, a thermometer is very easy and cheap. Why don't they use a thermometer? So I guess we all come from MIT. We are excited about hard problems. And yeah, you can measure temperature in principle. It's just that I need you to motivate my team enough that this is a really hard problem, that you need something, that it is not enough to just use typical thermometers.
Well, I think this is like the setting of the COVID pandemic. You know, people may not be aware if you
Exactly.
fevers. You could imagine that somebody's basal temperature might be 97.2, and then that they go to 98.7 or 99.2, and maybe that's subclinical infection, a sign of infection. There are lots of things that you could imagine in the present setting that this would be valuable.
Yeah. No, yeah. Now in the context of COVID, yeah, it's become much more important actually also to do it in a contactless manner as opposed to like using a thermometer. So yeah, maybe now I can convince my team.
I don't think people like know very well like diurnal patterns in temperature. You know, I'm sure there studies been done, but you can imagine that, you know, even in a hospital setting, you're getting your temperature checked every 4 hours at, you know, at a high level. We know that there are temperature curves. We know that there are cyclical patterns to them, but characterizing them, and for all we know, they might differ for different diseases. We know like Parkinson's and other diseases have autonomic dysfunction. I don't think we know like this thermoregulation affected in Parkinson's disease, for example.
That's true.
The next asks, how can the device differentiate between limbs or different movement of different limbs?
Oh, I see. So I haven't, in what I showed you today, I presented the person just as one blob. So we have more recent results that actually we can detect the separate limbs. So we can detect movement with the right leg from movement from the left leg, but we haven't moved it into the deployment stage. So we published the results, and it uses machine learning, of course, and all of that stuff is published and checked against, in that case, like a whole system that about every limb and each movement. But we like everything, like all innovation. So you start by just asking the question, can I do something? And then you prove that you can do it, and you publish a paper about it, and you get the proof of concept. And we hope that we can move that into the deployment very soon.
How does the system deal with multiple people in the home or animals?
Yeah, so the system, first of all, I mean, as you saw, like when the nurse came and the patient, the system has a notion of space. So it knows that there are two people there. So that's not a problem, because it can look at where the wireless signal is coming from and say that this body is changing the wireless signal and reflecting it from this path, while this is another body that is changing the wireless signal. Now, there is another thing, which is you want to associate identity to these like red dot and the green dot. So you want to say who's who. And for that, we train a machine learning classifier on the patient. Typically, when we are in a clinical trial, we focus on the patient, and then there is a patient whose signals we are interested in, and then there are the other people. And we don't try to distinguish who's who among the other people. But in this particular case, we were looking at the interaction both between the patient and his particular caregiver.
What features from the Emerald system have you found to be the most important in estimating sleep stages?
I see. So that's a more complex question. So I would say if you have to ask about physiological signals that are very much related to sleep stages. So of course, we all know that EEG is a way that, for example, PSG assesses sleep staging. So I can't say that the wireless signal directly get the electrical signal in the brain, because I don't think that's the case, because the electrical signals are in the brain are very, very minute, and particularly with the skull, it's just like it's very hard to capture them. But I think what the wireless signal is doing is capturing all of the other type of signals. So your breathing, the pulsing of your blood, and actually when you have REM, like the twitching of the muscles, and it's taking all of that stuff, which leaves its imprint on the wireless signal. It's kind of like doing with machine learning the inverse transform. It's saying, I have all of these observations from all of these different signals. Can you tell me which sleep stage this person is in?
So Dina, you say, I think. Is that because the computer's determining the stage of sleep and you don't know which relative inputs it's using to determine the stage, nor do you know its weighting of these individual inputs?
Yeah, so it's not exactly that. So I would say, so people sometimes tell you that with machine learning and deep learning, we know nothing. It's a black box. And I don't think that's true. We don't know everything. That's true. But it's not like a completed black box. So we can tell which part of the signal the computer focuses on. But the computer, like the way the machine learning is trained is that you show many, many examples to that machine. So you say, okay, here is the signal, and this signal is light sleep. This is deep sleep. This is REM. This is another person. This is a third person on a different night, and keep doing that for many, many examples. And then what the machine is trying to do is trying to create a model in its head, which is like these neural networks inside the computer. So it's trying to create that model. And that model is very, very complex. And this is where actually machine learning or the new deep learning is very useful, because we used before that to have models that are simple, and therefore we cannot capture all of the variations in the world. But because the model is very complex, and it really does not say, oh, this is exactly what I used to generate that this is deep sleep. It's kind of like, okay, I look at this signal a bit and this, and then it created a manifold, and that's my decision. Did I confuse you even more?
No. I'm waiting for someone. I'm waiting for a computer scientist to give you to press further. But there's some more questions that Abby has.
We do have a few more fantastic questions. The next one is, have regulatory agencies accepted Emerald data for claim submissions?
We did try to use it for claim submission. As I said, like the first set of partners we are working with come from biotech and pharmaceutical companies who are interested in clinical trials. And we and them and all of us, we are hoping that eventually we will take it to the FDA and like talk about these metrics as endpoints, and particularly in diseases like neurological diseases, where some of the current endpoints don't capture enough about the disease, and we know that we need more endpoints like for diseases like, for example, like Alzheimer's. So eventually we would like to take it and talk about these endpoints. We haven't tried to use it for claims, so I don't know what the issues are there, but I'll assume that you can't use it immediately for claims. I mean, and also currently we always rely on, and like the final decision is the clinician's decision. Emerald provides data, but it provides it to a clinician who actually makes the decision. So I think the clinician is the one who has to ask to use the Emerald data to support the claim.
So let me back it up a little bit. You're using the device to assess behavior, sleep, activity in a wide range of conditions for observational studies.
Yeah.
involved in studying individuals who are actively participating in a clinical trial of a new drug, for example?
Sorry, say it again.
Is Emerald being used as an outcome measure in any clinical trials of drug studies right now?
So Emerald is not used as a reported endpoint.
Is it used as an exploratory endpoint in any clinical trials right now?
I mean, I can't talk about our clinical trials, as you can tell, and you know very well. But just to answer you at a higher level, when it is used, it's used as an observational and exploratory endpoint. It's not yet used as the primary endpoint or a secondary endpoint. But it is very promising. Actually, I know that the FDA now has accepted, I think a few months ago, the first digital endpoint. So there are, and actually it's a primary endpoint. So there's a lot that is happening on that front, and hopefully we're gonna see more of these digital endpoints, particularly, as I said, the FDA I think is particularly open to when there are rare diseases or diseases where the existing endpoints don't really capture what the patient care about and what also the disease is about.
Abby, maybe we have time for one more question.
Wonderful. How are you ensuring data safety?
So there are multiple things. So first of all, I want just to emphasize that we do not collect any PHI in our system. So all the data is completely de-identified data. There is no PHI whatsoever that we store in the system, and it's intentional. And the second thing is basically the data is encrypted both on in store and in transit. Like as you move it, for example, it's encrypted, and also in store it's encrypted. And also there are all the credentials, like the standard credential that you need, like password, two-factor authentication to be able to access those accounts.
Dina, thank you very much for joining us today on Chet Talks and sharing your pioneering research. Obviously, lots of interest and questions in it. Join us for our next Chet Talk on Tuesday, April 11th at noon Eastern, when we'll be speaking with Krista Drobak. Krista Drobak is a health policy expert who for the last decade has been advocating for increasing use of telemedicine, and she's the executive director for the Alliance for Connected Care. If you want to know if the telemedicine policy changes that have emerged in the setting of the COVID pandemic are going to persist, join us. If you want to know how these changes will affect both care and research, you'll have a chance to ask her. Until then, the Center for Health and Technology at the University of Rochester thanks you for joining us.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, everyone.